Welcome to another episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. I am your host, Kelly Melissa Reinhart. And as with every other show, I am excited for you to be back here and for my guest today. But I want to talk a little bit about body, your physical body. We talk a lot about our mental health, our mental wellness, and we also do talk about physical health and how important and how related both of them are. But if you are somebody, not necessarily me yet, but there are still times I'm getting a little bit older and I feel my body just kind of stiffen up. I know that I have very much in the past had chronic back pain and neck pain. And there's times that I wake up and I'm like, man, how did I sleep last night? Because my body just hurts. And as we get older, or maybe we aren't as active in our lives, our bodies start to kind of stiffen up and it creates what is called chronic pain. And we really get into this place that could affect us in so many aspects in life. One is just doing things in general, right? Maybe you have to go to the grocery store and you don't want to walk around because your body hurts, or maybe you don't even want to get out of bed because it hurts, just physically hurts to move. Or maybe you are just in this place that you're like, I want to have more flexibility. I want to have more freedom and I want to feel better about my body. But then also it translates into our mental health. And both of them, again, the mind and body are connected. Therefore, they really affect each other. So that's why I'm super excited for my guests today. We're going to have open conversations really about physical and mental health. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest for today, and she'll share a little bit about her story too. So, Dana Karen, she actually goes by DK. She is a certified Pilates instructor who helps people in pain improve strength, mobility, and well being in weight neutral environment. DK is a graduate of the MSMS Advanced Movement Studies program and is also trained in pain uh, reprocessing therapy through the Pain Psychology Center. Having begun her own journey in chronic back pain as a young teen, she has been exploring ways to help herself and others regain joy of movement for decades. And after 20 years in the health sector, DK left a corporate career to follow her passion, later launching Movement Remedies, a chronic pain focused Pilates studio and movement coaching business. Her first book, You Are Meant to Move, a guide to conquering chronic pain, increasing stress resilience, and reclaiming an active life, was released December 2023. She is actually based in Edinburgh, Scotland currently. So, without further ado, DK, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I know you and I had a little bit conversation about all of these things, but can you share with the audience a little bit more about your story and your journey?
Absolutely. So, as you pointed out in my bio, my journey with pain started when I was 13. I had really big dreams about being on Broadway. And so I was dancing up a storm and did as many shows as I could. And that particular summer, I was in a show called Godspell in a local community theater. And being 13 and a female is kind of weird anyway, I think, and was probably a more difficult time than I was giving it credit for. But I was in the middle of a show and I had a solo, and I remember the spotlight was just on me, and it was actually the very beginning of the musical, and I made the most like benign little movement with my arm, and all of a sudden it was like a lightning bolt up my leg and into my back. And I made it through the show. it was rough, but I made it through the show and, spent most of the rest of the weekend on ice and heat. And it was sort of a chaotic experience, as you can imagine. But unfortunately, that became sort of a recurring pattern. It would show up unexpectedly. And um, so it really did, it undermined my dreams of Broadway before I had a chance to find out I probably wasn't good enough to be on Broadway anyway. But yeah, so that kind of changed my plans and things. And this pattern of back pain that leaves me in a state where I can't even stand up or move just kept coming up and up. And it really took, decades to realize. I was probably mid late 30s when I realized now I was probably starting to have some perimenopause symptoms, which is so interesting because it's sort of the bookend of what a female at 13 is feeling. Um, and I started having debilitating panic attacks in the middle of my workday. I was in a high stress corporate job, and at the same time, I was having this pretty severe flare up of my back pain. And this really prompted me to go on a long journey, which had many chapters. I feel like I sort of, it's one of those like wizarding stories where there was like, the kind, gentle person who helped me at like each stage of the journey to unpack, mental health, chronic dieting, body image, and all these things needed to fall away one at a time for me to understand it was probably my mental health all along that was bringing the physical discomfort to the surface. It was things that were, maybe trauma and distress and kind of inability to process my feelings in a way that felt safe, that was causing my body to have this sort of reaction of, trying to get my attention. And I really do believe that. And then, of course, on the flip side of that is sort of what happens, as you were, pointing out earlier, what happens when your body isn't showing up in the way that you need it to. And then your mental health also is, something you have to pay attention to, because that's very, very difficult, to try to keep facing your day and be there for yourself and be there for the people that you really care about when your body's not pulling its weight. And so it can be a very difficult sort of well to climb yourself out of. And that's why I'm so passionate about working this way with people, because I needed so many facets of the puzzle in my own life. And it's very difficult in our health system, to put all those pieces together, right? Because it's a very procedure oriented system. And so when you kind of start knocking on the door saying, I have chronic pain or I have a chronic condition, you often get then sent back out to 10 different people. And there's like no way to thread it together. And I just really feel for how hard that is. And and why it requires a certain kind of training and a certain kind of welcoming and comforting space where you can have all of the aspects of pain show up. So I realize that was a very long answer to your question, but it's sort of a long meandering journey.
No, that's perfect. And that's, I mean, the whole idea of this really is to get out the stories and show people that they're not alone in whatever they're
Yeah.
experiencing. And I know your journey began when you were really young. And that's, I know my example at the beginning was kind of like when you get older. So there's both dynamics that we really have to consider. And I would imagine, I mean, at 13 and all of these things starting, and then they probably, you went to your general doctor, then you went to another doctor, or you might have went to a massage therapist or PT or whatever it might be, right? Yeah, like you said, there's so many
Mhm.
different doctors that you would go to, and all the pieces never really fully lined up. And that is just, it's a hard process and journey to even go through, especially that
Mhm.
young.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's funny because through the process of writing the book, I really kind of went back to that moment a lot in a way that I hadn't been doing. Because I mean, it's really only the beginning of a journey, right? So like I don't often think about that first time, but I was also just thinking about how confusing that must have been for my parents. Because it's just not really normal to have a young person have that kind of pain, And of course I didn't realize that at the time. And there's a lot more that we know now about sort of when a child is going through puberty and like kind of those growth phases and sort of how that can be like really demanding on the body. And then if you're pushing like a physical, a sport or something, like that can be sort of difficult physically. But I have to tell you that, I mean, in my 40s, significantly in a larger body, having given up dieting and everything else, I feel so much better, stronger, capable, more confident that pain is something I can manage than I did at 25. So I feel like there's something to that, right? I mean, sometimes there's a physical, and I think it's really natural to seek a physical solution to a physical problem. But the reality for just about everybody I've ever worked with, including myself, is that there's a physical piece we need to work, but then there's like lots of other things we need to talk about. I mean, that's really what we call the biopsychosocial model of pain, and the fact that it can manifest physically but be related to many things in your environment and your relationships, stress, all those things, and we have to sort of figure out how to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, I mean, that it is so fascinating. Like now that I know a lot more of this, and I'm sure the same with you, is because I also myself, younger, I I had my daughter when I was 16, and all of a sudden I went from a kid to an adult in like body
Yeah,
wise, right?
no
And
kidding.
I often after that had chronic back pain, neck pain, all the things. And finally, later in life, I chose to get a breast reduction, and that helped significantly. But it was still overall that time that my body didn't really match my age, I guess you could say. And so it did kind of start that journey in the pain. And yeah, it's like you don't quite understand when you're younger what you're going through. And I also love to dance, and that was the way that I was able to move my body. And um,
Mm.
but the body didn't exactly allow me to like go professional. And so it's an interesting thing to think about. And then even as I'm also in my 40s and going into that part of life, you're like, okay, now I understand a little bit more about what's happening inside of me and outside of me. And so, yeah, it's definitely uh, an interesting process to just think about pain in general. And I have so many people that are around me that they experience a lot of body pain. And
Sure.
it's also been shown or noticed that there's a trauma that may have started or made it even worse. At least what I have noticed in some people that
Mhm.
are around me. So it's such an interesting concept.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's a lot of I've gone to some, trainings related to trauma because it is really interesting the ways in which they deal with trauma, in terms of, like, polyvagal theory and some of the modalities, that they've used are also effective oftentimes for pain. And, Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score obviously talks a lot about the physical manifestations um trauma in the body. And I think it is really also kind of an interesting time because there's so much research we can do now, and there's so much that's being understood about the nervous system that we didn't have, 20 years ago, because they can brain scan, and see activity in your brain and how it's connected to various mental states and things. So I'm just really hopeful also that we're going to start to get better at understanding how these things are connected and being able to help people sooner and not leaving them in the lurch, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so hard to physically not be able to do the things that you want to do, but then also acknowledging that it is a mental health or could potentially be related to a mental health challenge. And
Mhm.
so that's why I love this conversation too, is because oftentimes humans don't think about the mental health part of it all when we're thinking about physical health. and maybe even doctors, right? I know they are doing a lot more research and a lot more studies are coming out, and professionals are really getting into the space of being trauma informed and getting the knowledge that you have also, and knowing people that can help in the space. So I just think that it's important for, especially if you're listening or you're watching this, to understand that there is a possibility that your physical ailments, disease, disorder, whatever you want to call it, may be related to a mental health challenge. So we have to explore both options.
100%.
What we're gonna do, we have to go to our quick first sponsored break, but once we get back, I want to talk more about what you do specifically and how that has really helped, and why, like, as your journey went along, um, how you started really getting into what you do now. So we'll be right back after this
Sounds
quick
great.
sponsored break. And this episode is sponsored by Movement Remedies, a chronic pain focused Pilates studio and movement coaching business through BK. We'll be right back after this other sponsored break.
1,917 people die daily from suicide globally.
I lost my middle sister, Carrie, to a completed suicide on February 20th, 2017.
How does Make Mental Health Matter save lives?
Number 1. Awareness.
My story, all over it, isn't unique. I am a domestic violence survivor and a recovering addict. For 14 years, I was in active addiction, and because of Kelli and the work that she does and the opportunity to have my voice heard, I was able to stay clean and sober and have hit a year. I'm still here, and if it wasn't for Kelli answering my call the day that I thought I was going to take my life.
Number 2. Conversation.
I'm curious, and I know that I've heard a lot in the BIPOC community, it is very hush-hush. It's like one of those things that you don't talk about. Like, you literally feel like it's not a conversation you can have. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
First, shout out to Kelli, because I'm glad that she asked the question. I researched you before I went on your show, and I saw how real and authentic you were. And I just appreciate the question, because it is different, and we have to have tough, courageous conversations. So yes, I always say I'm a triple diversity threat. I'm a Black woman with multiple disabilities. Now, I'm not really a threat, but to other people, I may be, because people fear the unknown and what they're uncomfortable with.
Number 3. Education.
Kelli's passionate commitment to mental health awareness is a beautiful thing. It's clear in her social media posts, it's clear in the resources that she puts together, in the activities that she provides, her collaboration with organizations, and the consistent way that she continues to deliver a message, encouraging people to understand that they can share openly and to break the stigma around mental health. Kelli's topics cover children and adults, talk about things that we can do as a community, things that we can do individually, and her website is packed with information and resources and all kinds of contacts that you can use to reach out, whether you're dealing with something yourself or you're looking to help somebody else who is struggling. I encourage you to check it out.
And like that, we're back. If you are just joining the Make Mental Health Matter show, thank you so much for watching or listening. And I would highly encourage you go back and watch the beginning of this, as DK was really sharing her journey, which really began at 13 with chronic pain, and really exploring into the mental health space of how it's all interconnected, physical with mental. And so I would love to also talk about really what you do specifically with Pilates. So I have never taken a Pilates class. It's always been something that I've wanted to do, but can you just share how you started really looking into this area or modality and how that's helped throughout your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be really honest with you. I would never say Pilates is like magic. Okay. So I do think it's important that we move our bodies. And, my book is called You're Meant to Move because we really are meant to move. I mean, we are as a species active. And so I think whatever kind of movement speaks to a person's heart is the kind that they should do. What was special for me about Pilates was I discovered it after I had a herniation in my disc in my low back and was, really having a hard time coming back from that. Speaking of seeing a million specialists, we talked about before. And someone said, I heard Pilates is good for backs. And I was like, great, I'll try it all. So I tried it. And I think because I had this history of loving movement and dancing as a young person, there was something to the choreography and flow that helped me feel like I could reconnect with that as part of my identity. But like other kind of similar modalities, it really emphasizes moving with, if you have the right teacher, moving with intention and moving with an emphasis on really focusing on kind of what's happening inside your body. And I do think that there is a sort of a trend and I don't know if it'll ever go away, but where we see movement or exercise as sort of a punitive measure that we load onto our body because of a meal choice or something, or trying in an effort to shrink our bodies. And it's like about the calorie deficit. And that is definitely how I spent a lot of my younger years, was being kind of obsessed about that way to move. And so being in a space where there was a focus on the breath, I was still doing movements that were muscle creating, right? So kind of loading the muscles in a way that was intended to make me stronger, which we all need. But especially when you've got back things going on and it's very easy to become inactive. And so it's just really important to support the spine by muscle, creating more muscle. But the kind of breath and the ability to move my spine, the kind of focus on the spine moving in all directions, which just felt very therapeutic to me. So I really did enjoy it right away and kept going back. And that was, 17 or so years ago. So it was quite a ways before I myself became a teacher. But wherever I would move in my life, I made sure that I found a Pilates studio to take my classes, because that was just like a really important part of both my mental health and physical health. And then I wasn't introduced to the equipment until quite a bit later, at least a decade later, because it was sort of a more expensive thing. So I just, didn't bother with it. And it was Christmas time and the mat class did not have enough people in it. So they were just like, let's stick you in the reformer class. And that was when I really started to appreciate just how dynamic Pilates is if you take the whole method and all of the pieces of equipment, because it's purpose-built equipment that's specific to Pilates that isn't used anywhere else. And it's all spring based. And the thing that's magnificent about springs is the way they kind of respond, where the tension changes the more that you push on them, and you can use them to counter your weight. So you can use them in a way that helps you incrementally challenge yourself to doing things that may be hard to do, even just being in your own feet. Like if I want to stand and I want to challenge my balance, I can kind of help a person get halfway to being on one leg using the springs as a counteract. And the reason this becomes important is because the focus of my work in the chronic pain kind of approach to Pilates is helping identify both the things that feel really comforting to people and the things that feel really scary. Because we say the fear is the fuel of pain. So if I know what my body fears, I'm getting at the heart probably of sort of where the pain root is and why the pain is coming back. And so being able to kind of play with my relationship to gravity and with a person's relationship to gravity using the springs is, I think, what makes what I'm doing kind of extra beneficial in that realm over the mat. Because when you're on the mat, it's sort of like either you can hold your body up or you can't. There's not like a middle ground. And that makes it really hard for people. So that is where I've sort of modified how I use the equipment to try to get a person to to do the thing that they're afraid of, which in many cases, maybe it's afraid of a fall, um, or, afraid of stepping onto something if they had a physical, maybe it's so I think I should also clarify that when we're talking about chronic pain, the assumption is that this is not an acute injury that a person like actually needs to go to a doctor for in that moment, right? So the assumption is that the person is healed from an injury and the pain persisted even though the tissues have healed, which could be, a couple of weeks, or it could be a few months if we're talking a disc or something more significant. Or the pain arose without an injury, like a chronic migraine or neck ache, or, sometimes even a knee, you can suddenly have chronic pain. It just keeps coming back and coming back. And it kind of comes back without rhyme or reason. And there is no structural reason why the pain is happening. So the assumption is already that the person is like safe. Like, I think it's important to just like lay that out. Never, this is not a way I would work with someone who just kind of had a car accident last week. But when we want to get into that fear center and challenge assumptions that the brain starts to make about what the body can actually do, because pain is ultimately a protective mechanism. So I think, one of the first things that we do is try to reframe pain. And this was very difficult for me because pain had been ruining my life since I was 13, and I was mad. I was mad. I wanted to be on Broadway. I felt like my dreams were stolen from me. And the minute that I would start to feel something creeping into my low back, like it was happening again, it was like that, like an anger, and a grief. And so those feelings can really wreck you from the inside out. And they certainly don't help the situation, because you start to then, now your nervous system is like, okay, so what you're telling me is that this is not safe. This is not something that's good for me. And you kind of like, now it's like the very vessel I inhabit is problematic. And we're not gonna have progress that way. Also, that's just really not a way to live. Like that's really going to undermine your sense of self, your quality of life. So, really trying to understand that pain is a good thing. If you didn't feel pain when you stepped on a rusty nail, it would kill you.
Mm.
It's really important as an evolutionary development that we have it, because it saves us. And so I try to say, and this is kind of cheesy, but I try to say, thank you, back pain. Thank you for letting me know that this is a stressful conversation that I'm about to have with so and so family member, and just let me know you're there, but I'm good. And I mean, it's not that simple. Obviously, you can't talk it away, but like, I'm being sort of facetious, but reframing pain as like a thing that's meant to help you, almost like a little bodyguard, was just really helpful for me. And I think that we have a tendency to either try to shove it down and like ignore it, when it's usually probably a sign that there's something we need to attend to physically or mentally, right? Um, or we try to just kind of grit our teeth, or we're mad about it. But like, none of those reactions is actually going to help. We have to collaborate with the body. We have to collaborate with the nervous system. We have to say, okay, what preceded this pain and why am I here? What's the situation in my environment that could be potentially sending my sympathetic nervous system into a little fight or flight? And we have to just do a lot of excavation. There's a lot of work outside the Pilates studio that has to happen, and a client has to be really ready to go there. And then we can start to kind of work through the movement. And, my thing is, I'm not promising anybody you're going to get out of pain by working with me. Pain is, again, a part of life. It's a sign of a life well lived. Maybe you try some things, you do some new things, you get some bumps and bruises along the way. But most people do have reduced pain in the sense that it becomes more of like a static signal. Like, we want it to shift to the background. We want it to become a noise that's a nuisance, but not like a thing that makes you feel like your whole life revolves around, I'm not sure if I can go to that theater production because I'm not sure I can sit that long. And things like that, where you're actually having to make decisions about things that really bring enrichment to your life, because pain is having to take precedent. And so that's what we're really aiming for. And ultimately, my goal is making sure people are getting stronger, are working through their mobility, are experiencing all the functional movements that they need throughout their lifespan to be as independent and fulfilled as possible. And sometimes doing them through pain, understanding pain is in some situations, like this is a safe pain versus this is a pain that I need to be scared about. And that's kind of like a discernment thing that can kind of free you up to feel like I can go out and try new challenges and not fear that it's going to stop me.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much goodness in what you just said. And I also understanding like the Pilates machine. So when I look at them, I didn't know they were all spring loaded, and it looks like something I don't the
Like a torture
initial
machine.
thought,
You're
yeah,
gonna
I
say
was like
torture machine. Yeah, no, I
the initial thought, I was like, it kind of looks like a torture machine, but it looks like it's gonna be amazing because I also notice, being that I used to dance, when I don't like stretch my body out, or I'm maybe sitting more than I normally do, and I'm not paying attention to what's happening with my body, that's when I start to like have more of the chronic, or I wake up with a crinked neck or whatever. And then if I just sit on the floor and I start stretching or moving my body in the way that I know that it needs to move. So now I'm really curious. I want to go try some of the machines and see how, because I am very flexible. And I also, well, probably not as much as I used to be, but I'm still pretty good. So being able to have those machines that can move you in different directions, but also understanding that it's not just, you don't just go right after an accident, right? It's something that you would go and start to release the fear or the whatever the emotion that's coming up for you around the movement of your body. And then I know another key piece that you said was really like how we also have to pay attention to if it's like an after, like it just randomly shows up, right? And all of the physical parts of your body have healed how they should properly, but now you're having this reoccurring pain or sensation that's happening even after the physical has healed properly. So I think some people, maybe they're like, well, I've just always had that my whole entire life. It comes and it goes, and I don't know why it is, or, we tend to maybe make up excuses in our mind of what's going on to make it easier, I guess, to go through life with significant pain. But I also love that you said that you can acknowledge it and say, hey, I hear you, right? Like I see, or I understand that you're trying to give me something, and then what is that, right? Just understanding what is that. And I know there are times with me, and I learned this through neurolinguistic programming. We have a process that's called communicating with symptoms. And the first time I ever did it, I was like, wait, so my symptoms are based off of like something mental that's happening in my brain? And it was so interesting because then, especially with my mentor at the time, she's like, so now you know what that pain is telling you, because you ultimately give the pain a voice and you allow it to tell you what you need, which is such a different way of thinking too, is like, oh, right? You can have those moments throughout life. And not that, like you said, it's not this magic wand that it's all just going to go away and you're magically going to be better, but we can at least have those moments that we can reflect and we can understand what's actually going or happening within our body. So I just think it's all fascinating as far as the brain and the body and all of the interconnection that happens. We're going to go to our quick last sponsored break, but once we get back, we'll chat some more. So we'll be right back after this.
8 million people die by suicide in the world each year.
one person dies due to suicide every 40 seconds.
Have you ever felt completely alone?
Like your life doesn't matter.
You are not alone. Call the National Suicide Lifeline at 988.
Hope and recovery is possible.
You can help too.
With only $19 a month, you help us save lives through mental health and suicide prevention education.
Scan the QR code or go to makementalhealthmatter.org to sign up as a warrior for mental health today.
This episode is sponsored by DK and Movement Remedies, a chronic pain focused Pilates studio and movement coaching business.
Hi, I'm Ann Scotland, the host of Global Socialpreneurs. Join the experts, 12 p.m. EST on the Fresh Takes TV network for the best advice on social entrepreneurship. Join us here on E360 TV.
And like that, we're back again. We were really chatting. So if you happen to be just joining us, please make sure you go back and watch the first half of this. We're having such a great conversation, really surrounding chronic pain, also just physical pain that could potentially be mental health challenge related, or maybe there's a trauma in your life that happened, or maybe there was an event, maybe you were in an accident at one point in time and your physical body has healed, but you're still having pain or other physical challenges that are coming up. And how what we're talking about is really body movement, how body movement can help in this process, more specifically Pilates, and just how we have to explore both the mental and the physical to be able to understand what's going on in our life, and knowing that pain can be helpful for you because our brains, they are here to protect us. That is their whole entire goal, is to protect us. And they either go into pain or pleasure. And we do have a choice that we can start to really understand what our brain is trying to tell us, especially when it goes into the pain center. But I would love for you, I don't know if you have like some tools or maybe tips for people that are out there that might, other than finding a Pilates studio, that sounds fascinating, but just everybody, any day people that are out there that are living through these experiences.
Yeah, so I think there's several things I'd like to say. So first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that the modern society we live in is challenging, and it is not what we evolved for. So we basically have to process exponentially more pieces of information in a day than our brains had to process, you know, 200 years ago or whatever. And if you think about how long it takes for us to sort of have adaptations to make us more equipped for our surroundings, this is much faster than the human species has ever really had to face. And so I think what's happened in my own life is when I'm being forced to sort of show up in a situation where maybe it's not in alignment with my values, or where I feel like I'm having to be something that I'm not, that is often a trigger for me for anxiety as well as pain. And I do think we need to have more conversations about really the sort of public health epidemic around all of these things, and the fact that we cannot continue to work ourselves, into the ground and allow ourselves to be in work environments, allow employers and many corporations to kind of set up environments where people don't feel that they can express their needs from a mental health perspective. And there's so much that we can do if you are a leader of a team, or you are working in a place where you have people that work for you or with you, to try to create spaces where people can talk about the impacts of stress and really be honest about, physical and mental well-being. I just think that we need to do that as a society, and we need to stop blaming individuals, that they're not tough enough, that they're not showing up enough, that they're not, that they're supposed to be able to do more. I just think there's a lot of blame and guilt conversations and language that gets used with people, and it shows up all over the place. And pain is really just one piece of that puzzle. But then in terms of what I recommend for folks who are already experiencing chronic pain, hopefully also taking that advice to eliminate any negative self-talk you may have about that, including anything related to weight loss, because that is a really common piece of advice that my clients will get from the clinicians, which is honestly just kind of like lazy. And also it's where clinicians, I think, are feeling pressure to have an answer. And there's so much complexity to chronic pain that it's just really easy to reach for losing weight as a solution. And I've never to this day heard of any research of weight loss being associated with improvement in chronic pain. So let's just put that aside. And then I would sort of challenge anyone who thinks that might be something they need. Can you point to a time in your life when you didn't have this pain and you were able to enjoy it? And I've asked people this before. I had one person who was insistent that, her knees were giving her pain because she felt she needed to lose weight. And then I said, well, that same question. And she said, oh, well, yeah, I went on a vacation, with my husband, and I went for this really long bike ride and it felt fantastic. And I thought, so what do you think was different about that environment that maybe, could have made a difference? And, it really matters the environment that we're in. So let's stop the blame. We need to move a little bit every day. Once a week, I almost never have people come in for like a longer session. I tend to work in very short sessions multiple times per week. And I really encourage people with chronic pain to focus on any movement that feels good. I call it your warm blanket movements or your refuge movements. It doesn't have to achieve a specific thing, but you want to tap into what is actually causing my nervous system to downregulate. And let that be your platform, your baseline, and start doing that every day and see how your body responds. And really try to be present in your body, not planning your grocery list, not worrying about that email you have to send. 5-10 minutes in your body and take note of how it feels. Really start to track it. We can kind of go in with our own hypotheses and really learn things from our own experimentation, and then start to identify what's a challenge I want to work toward. What's a thing that really, like if it's going on a hike or ballroom dancing lessons or whatever it is that's going to make your life richer, then try to just very little bit at a time kind of dose in things that would help make it more possible for you to do that thing. And it's much easier to show up for something that's going to let your heart on fire than, I need to be in a smaller pair of pants. Let's just be done with that, please. So yeah. And then that kind of process of, if I have a little flare, I go back to my refuge, my warm blanket movements. I know I'm going to feel good. I don't have to think about it. It's my 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And then I when I'm having a good day, I push a little bit into, all right, let's see if I can do some pirouetting or whatever. And I need to do to make this new challenge possible. And it's just working that back and forth. And that's really how I work with people, whether it's Pilates or whatever kind of movement they're doing.
I love that. And I mean, it's such a shift, right? In the mindset. It's like you don't need to lose weight. That doesn't have to be your goal. And I'm more than sure that as you start to move your body, you will your body changes, right? But it gains that strength that you were talking about earlier that we do need in our bodies to be able to function and move and all those things, which ultimately helps with the whole physical body, right? So wherever you're supposed to be at weight wise or environment wise or whatever that looks like, it's just something that we have to consider thinking about it differently. And I love that you mentioned that. So thank you for really starting to shift the narrative around pain, shifting the narrative around body movement and whatever feels good for you, because what is going to be good for me may not be good for you and vice versa. And I may not experience the same joy in what you experience. And so we all just have to find what works for us, our bodies, and do that more often, I think is what I'm hearing. And not take it that we're doing it wrong or we're bad
Mm.
at whatever it is, right? Um, whatever it is works perfectly. And I do know, I mean, I know you are now in Scotland, but can you share a little bit more about how, I mean, when people come to you, because you also do things online. So can
Mhm.
you just share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I do coaching in general, just kind of working with people so that they have a place to dump their feelings about pain. But also I can advise on movement, and I work with plenty of people in their homes one on one. But I also have virtual classes that I teach that have a restorative Pilates focus. So they're very like body affirming, feel good movements meant to be accessible. And I also I'm actually starting up some classes that are chair based as well. So seated and standing with the aid of a chair. We can do lots of stuff that way. But perhaps most significantly is my coaching program, which I do around the book. So the book is written up so that you can do a 14-week set of exercises with journaling, et cetera. And so then I coach people through that, help them design a movement program, help them participate in a community of other people who are looking to achieve the same thing and can move together. And then by the end, you have your own tailored movement program you can take with you, and that can be your focus.
Amazing. And if you are it's Edinburgh, right?
It's technically Edinburgh, but I'm sure someone else
Okay.
would even say it's not right. But yes,
So if you happen to be in Scotland, you
there
can
you go.
go. Yeah, right. I'm like, we'll just go with Scotland, because I know it was a recent move for you,
Yes, very.
all the way across the country. But you can still, so if you happen to be in the area, you can work with DK in person. But if you're not, then you can work with her virtually, which I think is just amazing. And if people want to find you or follow you, where can they do that?
Yes. So I'm at movementremedies.org and also on Instagram, movement_remedies. Those are the best two places to find me.
Amazing. And for those of you that are listening, it's movement. So Movement remedies, remedies.org. I said that really bad, but movementremedies.org. You can find DK and her coaching and her book and movement and have more conversations if you need to unload, talking about pain. I know there are lots of people in the world that they have these experiences, and it's just so wonderful to have somebody like you that can help and understand, because you've been through this journey yourself and you know what has helped you, but you're also just sharing so much more knowledge with everyone that comes to you and really getting into the movement. It's not about the weight loss. It's not about the pain management, right? Like it's more of how can you
Mhm.
change yourself and your body to be able to support whatever it is that you want.
Yes. Yes.
So thank you so much for being my guest. Any last final words you want to share?
Yes, I think it's very common when you are experiencing chronic pain, the brain immediately feels it's permanent. And I think the important thing to always keep in mind is that that is, again, a protective mechanism to try to hold on to hope that change is always possible. The one amazing thing about being in this miraculous human body is that it can progress and adapt throughout our entire lifespan. And I know that's possible for you too. And so try to hold on to that. And there's lots of people out there to help.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being my guest. I so appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, y'all. That was another amazing episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. I am just so grateful. I mean, again, my guests really, they've been through these experiences. They have gone into, my brain is not connecting with my mouth. I'm like so excited because just body and movement and dance has been such a huge part of my life for so long that it was really that thing that helped me the most and continues to help me. I don't like technically dance anymore, but I just do it for fun now, which is even better. A little bit with my kid and in the living room or wherever it happens to be, but that is my favorite body movement of all, is just silly dancing at this point in my life. So I hope this was helpful for you. Whatever you happen to do, please make sure you come back next Monday. We air at 5 p.m. Mountain Time on E360 TV and 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Dream Vision 7 Radio. So I'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.